Turks and Caicos, and welcome back to another episode of Election Insights on Radio Turks and Caicos 89.1 FM. I'm your host, Mavette Ingham, and we are thrilled to have you with us today as we dive into the topic of political donation and campaign spending. Once again, I am joined by my co-host, Ms. Valette Pratt, our Deputy Supervisor of Elections.
And today's episode is packed with important information about how political parties and candidates manage their donations and spending. Our guest today is Mr. Bain, Deputy Director, and Mrs. McCartney, Public Education Officer of the Integrity Commission, here to help and clarify the topics of today.
Yes, let's welcome our guests and help us understand what counts as a political donation and the rules that guides how they should be handled. Let's get started.
Hello, folks. Richie Bean here, Deputy Director. Thanks for the Election Office having us with them again on another podcast, again accompanied by Tanisha McCartney, our Public Education Officer. So we'll be answering a few questions to assist persons in this upcoming general election period.
Hi, Turks and Caicos. We were here last week and we discussed a few things. We talked about donations, permissible donors, as well as the various levels and who is responsible. We made it known that it's the treasurer who's the accounting officer for the political parties and independent candidates. So we're here with part 2 of the elections, focusing on the Integrity Commission and campaign expenditure as well as donations.
So before we begin, Mr. Bain, just a bit of a recap. Can you explain to us who can be election candidate and what are the legal requirements for becoming a candidate?
Well, the Constitution of the TCI specifically deals with composition of the House of Assembly. And if persons were to go to our website, under our website About Us, there's a part called Legislation. If you go into that, you will see the Constitution is the very first document we have there that you can open up. Under Section 45 of the Constitution, it speaks to elected members of the House of Assembly. Section 46 speaks to qualifications for elected membership to the House of Assembly. Section 47 of the Constitution speaks to appointed members of the House of Assembly. Section 48 speaks to qualifications for appointed membership. And you would note, in particular, Section 46, qualifications for elected membership, refers to Section 49 that I spoke to in our session last week of the potential candidates coming to the Integrity Commission with a Section 49 declaration of any contracts that they have with the TCIG. So when you look at qualifications for appointed membership under 48, it too refers to Section 49 of the Constitution, which is worded differently to say Section 49 deals with disqualifications for elected or appointed membership. So under Section 46, specifically to what you asked, it says that subject to the disqualifications listed in 49, person shall be qualified to be elected as a member of the House of Assembly if, and shall not be qualified to be so elected unless, on the date of his or her nomination for election, he or she, A, has attained the age of 21 years, and B, is resident in the islands and has been so resident for not less than 12 months in aggregate out of the 2 years immediately preceding that date, and C, is a Turks and Caicos Islander. So specifically dealing with who could be a candidate. Thus, you have to be able to qualify for elected membership. Section 46 of the Constitution speaks to that. The disqualifications come later, and as I explained earlier, in order to be registered, if you happen to fall foul of one of those, which would be for purposes of the elections office, you did not come to us and declare what contracts you had with government, you would then, unfortunately, you could be disqualified from being a candidate. But if you look at Section 49 of the Constitution with the disqualifications, there's a very long list of reasons why one would be disqualified to be a member of the House of Assembly.
Thank you, Mr. Bean, for that valuable information. Mr. Bean, can you give us an example of what can be acceptable as a donation in the contents of election? What type of contribution fall into this category?
Sure. Donations under the Political Activities Ordinance can be cash, they can be non-cash. So someone staying at an apartment during a rally, persons offer their apartments accommodation, that would be considered a donation even if you don't pay. What the treasurer does is make a note of the value of that apartment for the night, 2 nights, 3 nights, or whatever the case may be, because a dollar value is placed on it on his form that he's filled out as a donation in kind from someone. You can get money, you can get loans, parties can get loans, individuals can get loans, goods and services. All these things can fall as donations because they all can have a value placed on them. So those are all to be noted, and they have been noted historically by the treasurers. And that's why I say it's a very onerous position that they have. It puts a lot on their shoulders because they need to keep tabs on all these things that are happening in a very short window, because elections normally happen within 35 to 40, 50 days after the House is prorogued. So it becomes very intensive for the treasurers.
And when you talk about political donations specifically, are there any difference or additional details that the public should be aware of?
Public in giving donations, the treasurers have always been concerned and would like for people to contact the hierarchy in the party and make sure it goes to persons who bring those funds into the treasurers, because they have to be passed on to the treasurer for the treasurer to make complete records of who it comes from. Because if it comes from an individual who is a Turks and Caicos Islander or for some reason is not a permissible donor, the treasurer needs to know that, because those monies still have to be reported to the commission, but they're handed back to that individual. If it's something in kind from a person, the dollar value of it has to be recorded by the treasurer, and the party can't touch those funds, have to remain in remit with the organization. But that is all done after the general election when they do their full accounting process. So it's important that the general public knows that monies donated to a party, they have to get through to the treasurer so that he or she has a complete record of what is coming in, because there are various categories under which they have to allocate those funds. In particular, if those funds may be coming from an individual who's not a permissible donor.
So we just spoke about what is a permissible donor, and we spoke about donations. Can you give us the type of expenses or activities that do not count as campaign spending?
I think it's easier to go through what counts as campaign expenditure, but persons give money to political parties as donations to be used for specific purposes. And if you visit our website or go through the brochures, there are items that are cataloged as qualifying expenditure. And qualifying expenditure would be party political broadcasts, agency fees, design costs, advertising, unsolicited material, the manifesto, market research, going to rallies, transport to rallies and political activities, temporary election staff. Do bear in mind, at midnight on the day of polling, all campaigning activity ceases. Therefore, on election day, Treasurer can't put down their costs for transporting people up and down to the polls, because that would be transport in relation to a political. That is not allowed after midnight on election day. Monies donated to a political party can't be used for, let's go have a good golly wash in Miami. It has to be accounted for. And that is why every single year, the party has to send through statements of accounts to the Integrity Commission. Those are due depending on what their spend was during the year. They may or may not attract necessity for an audit. But every year, the parties have to submit their statement of accounts of monies they've had. So what we would have is a continued track record of monies they had, how much they spent, where it is now, what has come in during the course of that year, because all of that has to be monitored by us. And like I said, it falls unfortunately on the shoulders of one individual, that treasurer of that party. The same thing would apply to the independent candidates, most of whom you don't hear from after an election. But if one from the previous election had any monies donated, and they only spent half of that, if they come back now, we will say, well, we have from the records you submitted, you still had $1,000, $2,000 that you have on record as having received as a donation that you didn't spend. So the monitoring aspect for the commission goes on year in, year out, because there has to be that continuity in giving account for the monies the people have given you to use for these specific purposes on the qualifying expenditure.
So what are some of the misconceptions or misunderstandings people have about political donations, and how can the public be informed about the process?
In the multitude of engagements we have had, I think that the general public recognizes what the monies for political activities are supposed to be spent on. I think maybe that transport on election day, they're not aware of that, but we always bring that to the attention of the candidates and the treasurers in particular, So I think the voting population here is quite savvy and knows what is allowed and what is not allowed. And anyone who chooses within the organizations to do something exempt from what is here, I think that persons will be notifying them that XYZ has occurred. And it's incumbent on those within the organization to say and self-check each other. That self-check has to happen given the responsibility of what it is you claim you want to do on behalf of the people. So the commission tries to work with you to say, elevate the operations that you have to the point where you self-check and don't fall afoul of this, because there can be, consequences for it.
And just to emphasize the role of the treasurer, how significant it is based on the summary conviction within the donations aspect. The treasurer of a registered party commits an offense if he fails to comply with these requirements. A person is guilty of an offense if knowingly or recklessly makes a false declaration and is liable to a fine of $5,000 or imprisonment of 12 months or both, according to section 35(7). So it's important for the candidates to ensure that they're communicating this information with their treasurer.
Well, Ms. McCartney, isn't it one of your training process where you, the commission, sit with the treasurers as well and make sure that they know all of this information?
Well, not only do we sit and schedule meetings with the treasurers, but also with the political parties, so that each of the candidates, those persons who are putting themselves up to serve for candidacy, is also informed of their rules and the guidelines and how best to go about ensuring that this information is communicated. Mr. Bean would have stated how reports are generated weekly and even monthly to ensure that up-to-date records are and reports are sent into the Integrity Commission.
Thank you very much. As we bring this conversation to a close, what final advice would you give to the voters and political participants regarding donations and the role they play in our democratic process?
The donations are essential for the continuity of the process that we have. Thus, there has to be the mechanism that you see in place of monitoring what comes in and also how it is exhausted. It is important that people are secure in that funds they give for that purpose are used only for that purpose. And I think anyone would call foul if they were to discover, yes, your donation was used to facilitate air conditioners and fridges for individuals rather than for the purpose which you gave them, i.e. a political donation towards a general election. We can only call on people to do what is right at all times when that level of responsibility rests on you and you turn and solicit the donations from people for that purpose, because it's most misleading for you to take it and use it for something otherwise when saying you're offering yourself in service to the people of the Turks and Caicos Islands. And I think that applies anywhere throughout the world. It just shouldn't be done for you to ask for something or to receive something for a specific purpose and on your own determine, I'm going to use it for something else that's totally unrelated to it. Thus, the choice that you make, be prepared to deal with the consequences that flow from that as an adult. So we encourage the public at large to be vigilant, to read, visit our website, go to the sections, look at the brochures, come to our office, get copies of them. We've handed out thousands of these over the decade that Ms. McCartney and I have been here. So they're all over the place. But there's still more that we can hand out, and we thoroughly enjoy the engagement with the public and the questions that they have. I know you have many more, but this is limited, and we can always come back for more sessions. But we enjoy having the discourse because we're showing our people this is what the ordinance and the laws say. This is why this is done this way. This is why this is done that way. Work with your candidates. Work with your elected reps. Don't go asking them for $20,000 for XYZ. They know that shouldn't be done. So don't make it difficult for them. Work with them within the rules that are here to protect both them and more in particular yourselves and the Turks and Caicos, so that we make the Turks and Caicos an even better TCI.
And hence it highlights the important role that the integrity play in the whole election process in terms of not only gathering and giving the information and ensuring that the forms are completed in terms of campaign and party expenditure, but also having that mechanism in place to monitor whether donations are, it's a true reflection, and if it is truly from a permissible donor, and to follow that money and see how it's being used, holding the treasurers accountable within the political parties as well as the independent candidates, and how the money is used, and persons who put forward themselves to donate these monies, giving them that sort of accountability, that guarantee that there is a mechanism in place that's there to monitor and ensure that they're using the money for which they're being asked to use that money accordingly, holding them accountable for that. So that is the Integrities Commission role in all of this.
We have covered a lot of ground today, and we hope the discussion has made political donation and campaign spending a little clearer for everyone.
Thank you to our guests for breaking it down for us and our listeners across the Turks and Caicos Islands. Definitely, the Integrity Commission will be back for more episodes and to share a bit more information with you. We work closely with the Integrity Commission during this election process. So tune in to Elections Insight on Radio Turks and Caicos 89.1 FM. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.